Okay, so have you guys ever been playing a competitive game of any sort and just thought to yourself, man, my character sucks. What were the devs thinking? Well, I actually have an idea of what the devs could be thinking, and I'd say that the conversation about characters being bad or characters who are supposed to be bad is pretty commonplace. You'll hear a lot of people talk about the balance of like why Geef needs to be bad or why Dhalsim needs to be bad, but very, very rarely do you ever hear about the design element of it. You always hear about the balance element of it. We'll go ahead and talk about the balance aspect of it just to get it out of the way, just so I can address that, yes, I know these characters cannot be good because it would be unhealthy for the meta of the game. The first attribute of these characters that I think requires them to be bad is when they have overly oppressive or uninteractive game plans. If we look back at Geef in Street Fighter 4, a lot of the times, as soon as he got in, like the moment he got in, you were just subjected to an insane 50-50 over and over and over again. It didn't matter if you just found out that the holding up makes you immune to grabs or backdashes gets you out of grab situations. Once you're in that situation, you're the exact same level as Daigo in that situation. It's just a matter of chance. There's a lot less depth there. It's really uninteractive. And overall, it hurts a lot of people's enjoyment of the game. The difference between you and a top player in this instance is that the top player is going to be a lot better at preventing them from getting that 50-50 on you. But once again, they're guessing the exact same way you are. They're human too. They're not able to just like automatically get out of the mix-up. And it not only hurts the enjoyment of the game for the person receiving the ass-kicking, the repeated 50-50s over and over and over again, it's also a lot less enjoyable for the other party. There's just something about whenever you overcome a really tough neutral and you land that really big hit that's really, really satisfying. And it becomes a lot less satisfying for both players if it's just easy. So there's quite a few characters that started off as characters that were supposed to be bad, but just through a few too many buffs, ended up breaking them and breaking the meta because they ended up becoming relevant. And I don't feel like I could talk about characters who became a problem with patches without mentioning Street Fighter 6 Geef. Street Fighter 6 Geef was pretty much unanimously agreed to be the bottom one character. Occasionally people would try to swap him out with Lily or Jamie, but for the most part, almost everyone agreed that Geef was like the worst of the worst in Season 1 of Street Fighter 6. Season 2 came around though, and they gave this guy some pretty big buffs in order to kind of throw a bone to the Geef mains and help the character be a lot more meta relevant, to try to take away some of that frustration that can come with playing a bottom one character and constantly feel like you're fighting an uphill battle. That didn't fucking work out. As soon as Geef got buffed, he became a super top tier threat. A lot of people were saying that he was top 1 in the game for a while, before they eventually had to drop an emergency patch trying to nerf Geef into like just decent levels. And even after the first few patches where they nerfed Geef over and over and over again after that, he was still a pretty scary meta threat whenever it came to the format. Nowadays, Season 2 is starting to wrap up. They finally got Geef into a position where they're comfortable with him. He is at a mid-tier right now, but honestly, I don't think he can go any higher than mid-tier without causing huge problems for the meta. There's just a long list of characters that you can't really afford to buff either their strengths or their weaknesses without potentially ruining the game's meta. As I mentioned before, typically this is in characters who have an overly oppressive or uninteractive game plan. You guys have probably heard the argument for why characters like Geef or Dhalsim or grapplers and zoners can't be top tier way too many times. Way too many times. It's almost common knowledge in the FGC that grapplers and zoners are just not allowed to be top tier, otherwise it'll ruin the game's meta. But what I'm here to talk about, and what I thought was actually more interesting, was the design aspect of it. And you guys might be asking yourself, what do you mean by the design aspect of it? What do you mean by a character's design is supposed to be bad? What I mean by that is that when a character is designed, they're often designed with a power fantasy behind them. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind as a character that is designed to be bad is a joke character. You'll see these in a ton of different games. Dan in the Street Fighter series, Pichu in Melee. You could argue Jigglypuff is also supposed to be a joke character that went horribly wrong whenever it went over to Melee. But there's just an aspect of characters that are designed to be bad because they want to shape the experience of, if you beat someone with this character, it's almost like a statement. It's like a power move when you beat someone with a joke character, right? And obviously you're still gonna have like dedicated mains of joke characters and stuff like that. They're just gonna be funny for people, and it'll really resonate with someone to kind of have that rush of like, yeah, I fucked you up with someone who's literally supposed to be an ass character. I don't think anyone's arguing against the fact that joke characters are designed to be bad. It's kind of like in the name. However, there's other characters that have different power fantasies that I feel like also are required to be bad in order to effectively sell that power fantasy. For example, boss characters. I want to clarify that when I say boss characters, I don't mean characters that are like secret boss characters like Akuma or something like that. I'm mostly referring to characters in platform fighters, Smash, if we're getting really specific. When I say boss characters, I mean characters who are the bosses of certain video games. Think Bowser, think Gannondorf, think King K. Rool, think Ridley. These characters are kind of sold on the idea that they're these hulking monstrosities that whenever they hit you, it hits hard. But, you know, a part of the deal that comes with being a boss character from a traditional video game is also being a little slow, a little predictable, kind of easy to outmaneuver and outplay. I think Bowser is honestly a better representation of what it means to be a boss character in Smash Brothers, right? In pretty much every installment he's been in, with the exception of Ultimate, and even that, it's like kind of arguable. The character has been a big, slow, hulking behemoth that when he hits you, it hits hard. He does a lot of damage. He does a ton of knockback, right? But, you know, the issue that comes with the territory of being a boss character is that his moves are inherently slow. They're telegraphed. They're easy to outmaneuver, and especially whenever you look at a game like Platform Fighters, where maneuverability is like the king of those games, he's going to struggle a lot. But at the same time, it really does sell the power fantasy of being a boss character. The same thing can be said with King K. Rool, Gannondorf, if you're not including Melee, where he was mostly just a clone character. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that whenever you play a boss character, it kind of comes with a territory that your character's gotta suck. He's got to be predictable. He has to be easy to maneuver around, and I feel like the experience of these characters wouldn't nearly be the same as if they were good. There's something really satisfying about just how slow and how hard Ganondorf's smash attacks hit. You know what I mean? Whenever you hard read someone's like spot dodge or air dodge with Ganon's forward smash, there is no other feeling quite like it. It's just such an element of like, oh my god, get fucked, you got so hard red. And same thing with like Bowser's forward smash. Whenever you look at like Melee or Project M, there's these like little elements of satisfaction that come with hitting your opponent with the big boss move, the big scary move that is like super easy to like navigate around it. Whenever you are playing like 40 chess with your opponent and you have the checkmate lined up perfectly, there's just really no other sensation quite like that. So we've talked about joke characters, we've talked about boss characters. The third archetype of character that I think has a valid reason for being a bad character is the underdog character, or the comeback character. They sell the fantasy of coming back against unsurmountable odds. And we've already talked about how just inherently playing a low tier kind of gives that sensation, but there's also characters that are strictly designed around that idea. And characters that I would consider underdog characters that are designed with the idea that they can come back no matter what the odds are, I would point to Little Mac, and I would point to Lucario. Let's start with Little Mac. Little Mac is a character in his game that the entire point of his storyline, the entire idea that makes Little Mac's like rise to fame so satisfying is that he's kind of the underdog. He's the little guy who's trying to fight against the odds to kind of prove himself in the world. whenever you look at Little Mac's model in Punch-Out, he has his name for a reason. He is quite the little dude. So that's why it's so satisfying whenever Little Mac can like hold his own and beat some of these huge Titan characters like Mr. Sandman or Mike Tyson if you're a real old head. And because of that, I genuinely think that they wanted to design Little Mac with that same sensation. I genuinely don't think Little Mac's design would work nearly as well if he was just a good character. It just would completely lose that aspect of the character's in-game design if Little Mac was a strong character. He's the underdog. He's supposed to be bad. He's supposed to be able to overcome the odds and be able to prove himself. That's kind of what makes Little Mac's journey so satisfying in his games, and I think they genuinely wanted to translate that over to Smash Brothers. Lucario, on the other hand, you might be thinking like, well, Lucario in his games doesn't really feel like a combat character. He really doesn't sell the idea of overcoming insurmountable odds or anything like that. However, my argument against that, the power fantasy of Lucario's design in the Smash series isn't really supposed to be that he can overcome insurmountable odds. He's kind of, and I need you guys to follow me on this one, I think the power fantasy of Lucario is kind of that like cringe anime kid that's like, okay, now it's time to get serious. You know what I mean? Like Lucario, he kind of spends the entire first half of the stock not really like fighting serious or anything like that, but then whenever he gets to high enough percent, he's like, all right, now you've made me mad. And I genuinely think that's the power fantasy that they're trying to sell people on. I think it's really funny. I think the type of people who are attracted to Lucario's design of just being like a, quite literally, aura farming character kind of resonate with that idea of like, now I can finally start trying. He really is that sort of edgy. Not only do I think joke characters, boss characters, and underdog characters have a valid reason for being bad characters, I also think beginner-friendly characters have a pretty valid reason for being bad characters. I feel like a really common situation that I've seen whenever I've met players who are new to Smash, a lot of new players are convinced that their Kirby goes crazy on the sticks. And I think a part of that is because they're a beginner-friendly character. I think the character has attributes that make them very easy for someone to pick up and play. Stuff like multiple jumps, pretty solid recovery all around, moves that naturally kind of extend into each other intuitively. His down B having some form of armor to it also kind of helps new players kind of learn. The issue with that is, and if you guys play competitive Smash, you guys probably already know, Kirby's a bad character. Like, he is consistently really, really bad. The only game that he was allowed to be a good character in was 64. I'm convinced that the only reason that Kirby was allowed to be good in that game is because they were just kind of figuring out platform fighters for the first time in general. But I do genuinely think that Kirby is designed to be a beginner-friendly character. The thing is about beginner-friendly characters is that they're not really allowed to be some of the best characters in the game. And you might be wondering why that is. Why can't my like pub stomper character be the best character in the game? Or why can't my pub stomper character be a strong character? It's because there are characters who are actively designed to reward you for better play. Characters that aren't beginner friendly are supposed to be rewarding to people who grind the tech skill. A lot of their power budget is distributed in a way that the more time you put into them, the stronger the character should feel. And if you were to have a top tier that is beginner friendly, right next to a top tier that takes a lot of tech skill, it really wouldn't feel fair to the top tier that has to put in a lot of tech skill, right? Like, why am I even trying to learn this character that takes a long time to learn and takes a long time to get good if I can just pick the beginner friendly character and do about the same thing, right? Be about the same power level. It feels unrewarding to people who want to play harder characters if beginner-friendly characters are allowed to be top tier. One thing I wanted to add on before I finish this up is that I don't think all low tiers are supposed to be bad. Only some of them. I think some examples of low tiers in fighting games that I play regularly that I don't think are supposed to be bad are characters like Dr. Mario and Jamie. Looking at Dr. Mario, I don't really think there's anything about his character or his design that screams to me that he should be a bad character, right? It's just genuinely that the weaknesses that he has to account for some of his strengths are just unfavorable in the metagame. If Dr. Mario was tweaked to be just a little bit faster, or to have just a little bit better combos, or just have a little bit better recovery, he legitimately wouldn't be a bad character, and I don't think it would cause a problem in the meta either. The biggest problem that Dr. Mario being meta would cause is the question of, should I play Dr. Mario or Mario? And that's what you kind of see in Melee, right? Where Doc, his weaknesses aren't as severe as they are in other games that he's in. So because of that, a lot of people opt to play Dr. Mario over Mario. But anyways, yeah, the main point I wanted to get to whenever I talked about Dr. Mario being a bad character is that he's not really supposed to be bad. It's just that some of his weaknesses are just a little too weak. And there's a lot of characters, I shouldn't say a lot of characters, there's quite a few characters that aren't really designed to be bad that unfortunately just so happen to be low tier because their numbers are just a little too low. An example from a game that is not a platform fighter is Jamie in Street Fighter. If you look at Jamie and then you go up a few tiers on the tier list, you'll kind of see that Cammy is pretty similar to Jamie in a lot of senses. They're both hyper rushdown characters who want to kind of be in your face, but also can kind of play at a range and whiff punish you if necessary, or stuff your approaches if they have the lead, or whatever they kind of really need to do in that instance. They play very, very similarly. The main difference is that Jamie's damage is just a little too low. His options for dealing with projectiles are just a little less consistent than Cammy's. His dive kick is just a little less safe than Cammy's. Jamie's just a character that legitimately, if they just wanted to fine tune a few things, the character could be like meta relevant, and I don't think he'd be a problem. The biggest problem would genuinely be that we have more Cammy players running around. I'd hate that personally, but you guys get the idea. But yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I think the balance aspect of why characters need to be low tier is talked about a lot, but I don't see nearly as many people talk about like the idea of selling a character's fantasy, or in Smash's case, making them accurate to their source material through the lens of them being a bad character or a bottom tier character or anything like that. But yeah, that's all I really got to say. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, everyone.